Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining LADCR this evening for this webinar on cannabis funding and investments. Tonight's topic is focused on cannabis investor Q&A. First off, we're just going to get into some housekeeping, things before we get into the investor introductions and the Q&A and the bulk of the webinar. So what is the BLC? The Department of Cannabis Regulation has officially launched the Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance BLC program to assist social equity applicants in the city of Los Angeles with obtaining a commercial cannabis license and operating a successful cannabis business. Program highlights: self-directed online education on topics related to running a successful cannabis business through our new learning management system, live webinars with subject matter experts like this one, checklists, worksheets, and other management tools. Please visit cannabis.lacity.org for more announcements on our ever-expanding BLC program. Now into just some of the quick rules. Please note this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed after the editing process on DCR's website. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during the session. However, you will be able to see and hear all the panelists. There is an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information. Please ask questions about the subject matter in the Q&A. We are gathering them and we'll be responding to as many of your questions during the Q&A session during the last 20 minutes or so of the webinar. You're definitely encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen. Chat is available for interaction with other participants. If you use the Q&A box for questions, everyone will be able to see the questions when they're answered. Friendly reminder, please use caution when sharing personal information in a public forum and keep your questions focused on tonight's topic. Some quick disclaimers. The City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation does not endorse specific companies or products. The content presented here is for informational purposes only. The content was not created by the Department of Cannabis Regulation or the City of Los Angeles and is for informational purposes only. The information is subject to change and does not replace or supersede the Los Angeles Municipal Code, nor constitute legal advice. You can call 213-978-0738 during business hours to speak to a DCR representative. Thank you. And then just a quick last reminder before we get into the introductions, just drop all your questions in the Q&A box. We'd love to answer questions directly from you guys at the end of the webinar. So don't hesitate. This is a great opportunity, and after the introductions and after I think you start hearing the speakers, you'll understand that they're great people, and they're just like both a wealth of knowledge, and I just implore you to take advantage of it by asking the questions. So now I think we're ready to get into the introductions. For our first speaker, if you were on the last webinar, you saw the last webinar. She was actually on the last webinar, and we had such good feedback that we were asked to bring her back as a speaker. By the way, my name's Sam Zartoshti. I'll be hosting, and I host educational events. So for me, this is like what I love to do, and like a cannabis educational events to clarify. And so I love bringing people together and sharing the knowledge. And like I said, I think we have some amazing speakers. So our first speaker is Jean Sullivan, and Jean has been investing into the tech industry since 1990, where she co-founded a venture capital fund. Jean began focusing her investment efforts on the cannabis industry around 2014, 2015, and she currently serves as the CIO of ArcView Ventures and the co-founder of the ArcView Collective Fund. Jean is highly sought after as a speaker and advisor. She has spoken at conferences all over the globe and heard pitches from countless companies. I've heard her speak a few times, and that's where I had the pleasure of first meeting her. And I can say, she's by far one of the best speakers I've ever heard. And I host events where I bring speakers together, and I can just say she's by far one of the best speakers. So we're all very lucky to have her. And Jean has been a member of the Women's Leadership Board at the Harvard Kennedy School, and is an Athena Entrepreneur Fellow for Bernard College. She also serves on the Global Board of Trustees of Astia Funding. and yeah, without further ado, Gene, I'd love for you to kind of like, give a quick introduction of yourself and any opening remarks that you may have.
Aren't you kind, Sam? I'm going to call you when I'm in a bad mood, okay?
You're always
You know,
welcome.
thank you for inviting me back. And I am passionate about speaking with entrepreneurs and people in license pursuit, people in our wonderful cannabis industry. I love having the chance to share, hey, my screw ups and the screw ups that I've seen many go into, so I can keep you back from those screw ups. So that to me is what tonight's all about, giving to each other. And thank you for having me. And I'm so pleased to have my wonderful colleague on here. So go ahead and introduce fabulous Krish.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gene. And yeah, that's a great point of advice. It's great to learn from your own mistakes, but I mean, it's honestly, it's better to learn from other people's mistakes. So yeah, thank you for your willingness to, share. And yeah, to introduce our next speaker, I actually met him, I'd say like, 5, 6, I mean, yeah, like 6 years ago now. And he was someone that gave me some advice when he was first kind of getting into the industry on fundraising, and he kind of asked a few questions on cannabis and stuff. And he's just someone that he's now doing really big things. But it was really cool that I had no idea what his background was when I first met him. I thought he's just some finance guy, and that didn't really mean anything to me. I was kind of like a little bit younger and naive. And the fact that he's willing to take time to like kind of like sit down with me and kind of like help me out a little bit. Now that I know what his background is and kind of what he's doing now, I mean, it definitely means a lot. So, without further ado, Krish, he joined Arcadian in 2018 to help lead out, the principal investing activities, including deal sourcing, due diligence, and negotiations, bringing more than 15 years of financial services and Wall Street deal making experience and knowledge. For much of his career, Krishnan has served as a healthcare investment banker in relationship coverage roles with Cowen, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and Morgan Keegan, and has completed more than $6 billion in closed capital raising and M&A transactions. Krish began independently working with companies in the cannabis industry in 2016 in varying capacities as a private investor, mentor, advisor, and consultant. Krish completed his undergraduate studies in 2001 at the University of Texas, Austin, where he earned a BA in economics with a focus in business. So yeah, without further ado, Krish, thank you so much for, taking the time, and, would love to hear, you give a quick introduction and any opening remarks you may have.
Oh, that was a really good intro. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. And obviously, always good to see Gene Sullivan on the stage. And this is the first time I've ever had the pleasure and honor, really, of being able to share a stage with her. So hopefully, this is one of the first of many. I'm really excited to be a part of this. The reason why I left Wall Street and finance and came into the cannabis industry was I wanted to be a part of really being building something. And the beauty of what I learned in the cannabis industry very quickly was this is not something that everyone is trying to beat each other at, but something that we really have to be building and growing together. And yes, there are competitors in this space, just like in everything in life, but it's kind of like playing on a football team where you're trying to vie for the starting position, but everyone's on the same team to win the championship at the end of the day. And that's what we're all here for, and that's what you're all here for as well. So congratulations on taking the step, and hopefully we can help you out a little bit along the way.
Heck yeah, thank you so much for that. And again, really appreciate you both being on here. So we're going to get into the questions now, and we have 10 preset questions. If we have a decent amount of audience questions, we might cut these a little bit short, just like, to get to the audience questions and answer theirs. But, to get started with the first question, we'll start with Gene, ladies first, obviously. Sorry, Krish. But, the first question is, what are the most important factors investors consider when evaluating cannabis businesses for investment?
So you know what? We always used a line, and I still do, because we're investing today out of the ArcView angel fund that we have. It's called ArcView Collective Fund. We've made 19 investments. The only way that we say yes to an investment is if we believe that CEO knows what to do and how to do it. Now, you're not born knowing that, so you better learn it or you're not going to get our wallet out of our pocket. It's kind of that simple. And you know what? We're not always right either. Like we miss a few things that, whoops, they didn't know what to do and how to do it. They didn't understand the capital needs of the business and they screwed that one up, didn't raise enough financing. I was out with one of our CEOs today and I was hearing from him how he was very focused, but he laid out 5 new initiatives. Like what? You know, that doesn't sound very focused, but to get to the point, you know, and to limit it to kind of my top 3, I gave you the umbrella. Do you know what to do and how to do it? Well, guess what? Go figure that out because there's plenty of experienced entrepreneurs around or people like us who care and will take you under our wing and kind of coach you up. But I think this is something that blows me away. My number 1 hot button, are you able to articulate what in the hell you're building, your product or service? It shocks me that people can't necessarily, the CEO, the founder can't necessarily spit it out. I'll stop them 10 minutes and say, what, hit me again? What, tell me what it is and why you're calling it that and what do you do? So that's critical. Number 2, know the numbers. If I ask you, what was the pre-money valuation of your last round, and you've got a blank look on your face, guess what? You got today's meeting, you're not going to get the next meeting. You know why? I want you to be a good steward of our capital. You got to understand the numbers. And you know what? If you don't, just get somebody at your side who can and learn from them. It's okay to bring that temp CFO to the meeting. That's fine. It makes you look good. And so thirdly, I really look for the ability to execute. We might know, this is a lesson I learned through the years because I didn't share with you. My best credential is I've seen 1,000 times 1,000 companies. That's a lot, that's 1,000,000 companies. And so are you going to be all hung up about the features and functions, the speeds and feeds, and just tell me how cool this product is? You're going to tell me how you're going to get it over the finish line. I'm looking for your ability to tell me the business of the business. Back to you, Sam and Chris. You give us a few more.
Yeah, you know, those are all really good points, and I think you know some of mine are saying the same thing in a little different way. But you know, one thing that we want to make sure that you know we always say we look for team, but that's you know a bit nebulous when in this context. I think what Gene hit at is you know knowing or you know being able to have the execution ability of your business, being able to back that up is really what team is getting at. And if you don't have it, you know yourself, bring someone else along that you know can cover your blind spots. You know the best businesses work well together as a team. It's not just a business, it's also a culture, and the team is the critical part of that. So that's one thing that we look at. Again, you know, everything really kind of depends also somewhat on the stage that that a business is in. But for the for the purpose of this conversation, let's assume that you're talking about a startup. And so with the startup, you know, it's a blank slate, but your responsibility to investors is to really be able to paint that picture on the blank slate to show us, okay, this is what this is going to look like, and this is how we're all going to be able to benefit from it. So I think having that, you know, that strategy is very, you know, is critical to being able to get investors on board. And then, you know, part of that is really preparation. And again, that's part of the knowing the numbers that Gene said is really knowing every aspect of how you plan, what you plan on doing, why you plan on doing it, and how do you plan on going about doing it. Knowing what you don't know is critical. And being able to be kind of forthright and candid about what you don't know is important in building that bond, building that trust between you and the investor.
No, so important. And you guys are formidable investors. So it's important. Your words are important. And just to key off of what you said about the numbers, another thing is if I hear you say, oh, I'm raising 2 million and this is our last raise, and let's say it's your first raise. If I care about you, I am going to, first of all, I'm going to stop you and say, never say that to an investor. You know why? What about expansion? What about international goals? What about state expansion? What about, team hiring? So that shows me you don't understand the capital needs of the business. Guess what? All this is find outable. You can get smart people who really can show you some real sensitivity analysis and teach you the numbers around your capital needs and your business model so that you are very fluent in it. That is important, more important than you might think. All right,
Absolutely.
what else can we share?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you both for that. I just had a quick follow-up question for Krish and Gene. If you wanted to add anything, please go ahead. But Krish, I agree, as someone that has has pitched many investors in the past, the main thing investors always told me is like, where's your team? Because I was like, kind of a solo guy trying to do things all on my own, and thought like, oh, I raise the money and then I hire people. Like that's what do you mean? I obviously learned that's not how it works, and I think we've kind of talked about that. You and I, it's not how it works. So I'm just wondering, how do you recruit a team, or how do you kind of like build a team? Any tips on that before you've raised capital? When you're
Yeah.
still kind of like, you haven't even like raised the capital to actually
Yeah.
build out your actual, your retail space, or your business. How do you recruit a team, when you don't have any cash flow coming in?
Sure. I'll lead off and just say this. What's critical to me is that you lay out the functional hires. Hey, here's the next 3 functional hires. They're on your pitch chart. You're saying, okay, I'm gonna need a CRO, to help drive sales, or I'm going to need a temp CFO to help me keep, the capital raise straight and what we're doing, maybe help me with contracts. So, or you're building something, I need a head of manufacturing, or I need a CTO. To lay out the functional needs over the next 18 months, that's important. And then to say, I've got my binoculars on, I'm looking for those people. And in fact, I know a great person. She just came from Salesforce. She's going to join me as soon as we're funded. And I'm just so thrilled to bring her to the table. See, then you use that kind of an update to these lousy investors like us that you're talking to, because you want to keep us posted on what you're doing. And so that kind of list of who you need to hire. Now, let me tell you, there's plenty of people who have wealth, who might care about you as a CEO, who know you, want to be on your team. Here's a really interesting trick that really works. A lot of people do this. You can give them some equity. You can even say, here's what I'm willing to pay you, but I can't pay you till we raise the money. So there's things you can do to really bring somebody on to help you get to that first step. I think it's critical to know some of those ways to go.
Yeah, and that that's obviously a sell is that you have to that you have to win as a business owner starting a business from the ground up. That prepares you for the sell that you'll eventually have to make once you have to raise money from investors. So the sell being, you've got to bring on, let's say that you're opening up a dispensary, and you need you don't have a retail experience. You don't know how to run a retail store. That's okay. You bring other skills to the table, but you need to bring someone on that understands retail, so that way it positions your company to succeed, or positions the company in the best possibility to succeed. So you need to be able to articulate your vision and your goal to that person that you want to bring on, because they're going to significantly improve your probability of your business succeeding. If you're spending all this time and energy and money into building this business, right, the last thing you want to do is to see it fail. And if it does, that happens, but you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to avoid avoid that happening before you even get off the ground. So practice your selling on making those initial recruits. And yes, the way to do it is through equity. And in order for someone to be able to say, look, I'm okay with not taking cash right now in lieu of equity, they're really saying they believe in you and they believe in what you're doing. So again, that's a good way to sell your business before you're having to sell it to investors.
Heck yeah. Thank you both so much for that. That was awesome and extremely helpful. The next question we're gonna do is what are some of the biggest mistakes cannabis entrepreneurs make when pitching investors?
I guess I'll start with this. The biggest mistake is really, I think, in mindset. And in particular, one that I've seen so many times in the cannabis industry is the if you build it, they will come pitch. And quite literally, if you've ever watched the movie Field of Dreams, a great movie from back in the 80s or early 90s with Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams is the whole idea there is if you just create a company knowing that there's demand for the product that you're selling, that you're going to have a successful business. Yes, you may have sales if there's demand and you happen to be in a busy intersection, you run a retail store. But if you don't run the store properly and you're losing money, it's not going to last very long. So that would be the first thing that I would avoid if you're going out and making a pitch, is just by saying, if we're putting this here, then we're going to get business and we're going to be able to run that business successfully.
No,
Jean?
I think that's critical. One of my real hot buttons is just, I said a little bit about this earlier, really being hung up on the product, the feeds and speeds, so enamored with all the pieces of the product. That is important. Don't get me wrong. Tell me the business of the business, how you're going to distribute the product. Back to the team, which Chris was just talking about, so critical. Who are you going to hire? Are they the best people possibly? That's what you need. Are you afraid to hire people better than you and more knowledgeable? Don't be. It'll make you look good. The Stephen Jobs School of Hiring, hire the best people, have them tell you what you should be doing and what they should be working on. So that's important. Now, I mentioned the numbers earlier. Another numbers complete stupidity move is to come in and have an out of control valuation. It just makes you look really foolish. And you know what? Then we're not going to invest. So now you've screwed that up. And the valuations have percolated up. They're high these days, but they've got to be reasonable or you won't get our wallet out. Because here's what happens. We have to figure out if your business can exit at a multiple of that valuation. So let's say you come in, your pre-product, pre-revenue, your early days. I've had more than one company. In fact, I had a wild one in the last week that had, a enormous valuation. I said, how'd you do that? He raised 12 million in his early part. There were hardly any revenues. How'd you do that? In the 70s valuation. He said, because I've had so many exits, people just believe and know that I can put lightning in a bottle again. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for telling me about your business, but sorry, we're not going to invest. And I hate that. I hate not being able to invest, but here's why. Let's say I invested at 70 million. So most software platforms are sold, let's see, in tech for anywhere between 75, 150 million. There's some exceptions, certainly. Let's say, I can get, 140 million. I want a 2X. Is that what I want? Is that good enough? Not really. So, you've got to be able to have a multiple on the exit that's valuable. And so that's why this is hard. It's hard. Listen, it's hard as an investor to do this. It's hard as an entrepreneur. But if you came in reasonable and what I call a win-win valuation, you got a chance. because you're making a win for you as a business. You're getting financing runway. You're making a win for the investor. So together you can build the business. So if I think you've come in way too high, I have already decided you have a disease, and it's not COVID, it's dilutionitis. You are all worried about getting diluted. That experienced experienced entrepreneurs will tell you that's the biggest mistake they ever made in their life. So learn from that. The biggest mistake is to be all hung up about how much equity you're losing in getting funded. That is a crazy, crazy mind state. Get over yourself.
And Gene, would you agree the same goes with bringing on, you know, team members? I know for myself, I think that was, I'm guilty as charged. You know, I didn't really want to give up any equity to like teammates. And I kind
That's
of
terrible,
realized, you know,
Sam.
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you know, guilty as charged. But
Yeah.
it's the same
No,
situation, right? You can't be,
I wouldn't invest in a situation like that, because I believe the CEOs that I love and have invested in, guess what? They get everybody, including the receptionist, some equity, because they want everybody to feel ownership. I believe in that. And I hope to preach that and change people's minds if they, you know, didn't understand that.
definitely.
Absolutely. And the same goes, we do that in our business. You know, I run an investment fund. However, we've got a lot of people that work with us that don't necessarily work in the investment function, but they really support everything that we do. We want to make sure that they are excited about what we're doing, and that they have skin in the game. And when you have skin in the game, meaning ownership, you're a lot more serious about it, because this is your baby as well. You want to be smart about it and make sure that they do vest that equity ownership over time, so they don't, you know, just take the equity and leave. But, you know, there's strategies around that, but the important thing is make sure that everyone's well taken care of, and that means giving them the upside of what the business is going to provide.
Definitely.
Yes. And one other point on the valuation, I think that, you know, is important to keep in mind, is that going with a very high valuation, you may get financed even if it's too high of a valuation, because there's always going to be someone willing to pay. And if you're able to find that person that's willing to pay that price, then great. And that's usually tied up in kind of macro euphoria. We're not really experiencing euphoria right now in the current capital markets, so you're probably not going to see that. You're probably not going to see investors go for a very high valuation. In fact, most investors will probably hammer you on valuation. But, you know, let's assume that we were in a bull market right now and everything was going up. The problem that you run into is inevitably you're going to need to raise money again. And if you don't have that cushion, more importantly, if you're going to have to raise money your next round at a lower valuation, it makes it a lot more difficult to do so, because first of all, you have to get consent from your existing investors to be able to move forward with that transaction, and they're not going to be really happy about that.
Yeah, I mean,
And you know
I
what
can't
else?
name any. Or go ahead, Gene.
No, you know what else happens in the scenario Chris just described? Everybody feels lousy instead of a building block approach. Build it one brick at a time instead of, you know, going to the mountain, and then a down round feels lousy for everyone. Instead of winning, you feel like disappointed. Who needs that?
Yeah.
Life's
Yeah.
too tough. It's hard to build a business. You want to get inspired? I just watched both the WeWork story, WeCrash, as well as the Uber story. Don't miss either one of them. You will be so inspired, both good and bad traits in those CEOs. And incredible, you know, back and forth with the team, with their investors. I will just humbly share, I was on boards with both of those benchmark GPs who are on those teams. It was quite an experience. I wasn't in those companies. How I wish I could have been, but I was under, so I've seen both of those guys. I mean, these stories will inspire you and teach you. And I think I got a big kick out of watching both. You'll see all that in action, the money issues, what you have to know. Oh my golly. Oh, it's so interesting. The Uber guy goes to the head of SoftBank and he said, do you want to see the deck? He said, no, I just care about you as a founder. Like what? And he like ran out of money. It was like such good lessons to learn.
And oftentimes with the most successful businesses, the traits that got those entrepreneurs to achieve that success often is their downfall as well.
Yeah.
So understanding, when to rein that back and create balance. I think everything, that you can study and understand about growing and 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 running a sustainable business is a microcosm for everything in life, and in this case it's balance, and having balance uh, in your strengths and weaknesses, I think, is important, but understanding when to turn off your strengths when it turns into your weakness is critical.
Definitely. Thank you both so much for sharing that. I can't thank you. I can't thank you both enough because I think that's something that I don't hear enough. And I think it's something that I've personally seen a few like really big cannabis brands that are very well known, but you kind of don't see them anymore. And when you kind of like dig into the weeds or whatever, you figure out that's exactly what happened. And essentially, they raised it too high of a valuation. They didn't perform. They needed to go raise more money, and they needed to raise it at a lower valuation. Their investors, or just like aggressive investors, and just not letting it happen, wanting the company to kind of like go down so they can take over the brand. And I've seen that happen with a few, I mean, brands that I'm sure we've all heard of. But yeah, so thank you. I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is a very rapidly evolving industry, and I think one of the things, when specifically talking about cannabis, that has led to companies starting out well but not but then fizzling out, or just completely dropping off a cliff, is that they're they've developed a product for a certain type of customer, or for a certain phase in this life cycle that is the cannabis industry really over the last 6 years, and that rapidly changes. So if you're building products for a first time cannabis user, and that's it, and you don't evolve from there, then what happens when that person is no longer a first time cannabis user, which is pretty quickly after they buy your product, right? So that's been the downfall of a number of brands that did really well early on through marketing and being able to get consumers who were not cannabis users before to feel comfortable, but then where do they go from there?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then I think honestly, it looks like we have like a few questions that have come in from the audience. I think we're going to ask one more of our preset questions, because I think the next one is a good one, and then I think we're going to jump to the audience questions, just to see if you guys have any answers that are like immediately helpful to the audience. But the last question I want to ask from our preset question, and we might come back to these, but for now, just discuss, if you guys can, either of you or both of you, discuss the challenges social equity cannabis business owners face in regards to funding. And one thing I'll say is, I mean, of the social, I don't know a ton of the social equity participants, in our system, but the few that I've met, for the most part, they're first time fundraisers. So I think, like, discuss the challenges social equity cannabis business owners face in regards to funding. Considering most of them, at least for the ones I've met, and I could be wrong, but most of them are first time fundraisers, is like, what I've experienced.
You
Gene, you want
go.
to start with? Okay.
No, you go.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point, in that a lot of times, if you're a first time fundraiser, you lack that, you lack the experience of being able to kind of speak investor speak. And I saw this a lot back in the earlier days of this industry, where there were truly a lot of entrepreneurs that had never really had never really done created a legit business before. They may have been, they may have grown or sold, but it wasn't in the context of a legal framework. And and having to go and speak to investors and ask them for money is very different than being able to actually run the business. So you've got to be able to run the business and also be able to speak that speak. So what I mean by that is understanding what is it that you actually are doing, what is and being able to articulate that and create a narrative within the confines of like a pitch deck or a presentation that you're inevitably going to have to share with investors. And so I think understanding what you're doing and creating a narrative around that story to get people excited is one thing that a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, a lot of first-time fundraisers have challenged with. And by the way, raising money is the number one, I guess, key to really failure. I don't want to say success, but the lack of being able to effectively raise money, which is effectively being able to tell your narrative, is the number one cause of failure in the business world.
Yeah, great point. So here's a different slant on social equity. So I'm in New York City. We have been in the dark ages too long. And finally, we passed adult use legislation a year ago, March 31st. The regs aren't quite out yet, but things are really happening here. Now, in case you don't know this, it is predicted, and the plan is for at least 50% of these new licenses to be social equity. Isn't that interesting? How is that going to happen? Keying off the point you already heard from Krish, and what I said at the top of this discussion, do you know what to do and how to do it if you're a first-time entrepreneur in licensed pursuit? Do you know how to articulate what you're doing and you create a deck that's going to get our wallet out? So there's lots of opportunity for especially, wonderful brands and license holders and strong entrepreneurs in California and the Western states that have been at this far longer. From a legal standpoint, I will add as a footnote, since we also, in case you didn't realize this, have a very large, at least $5 billion legacy market here in New York. Imagine that, right? But you are the ones who've already been building brands and all that. So there's opportunity to partner, to come in and bring your brain power and expertise if you're consulting to companies or if you want to play in New York. And it's really very exciting time because today the hemp growers who met certain criteria are going to be allowed to grow THC cannabis in New York State. And today, 50 of those cultivators got that license to do that. It's a provisional license for the next couple of years because we know we need supply if we're going to have all these dispensaries. And also about 18 processors who were processing hemp CBD products. So there's really great opportunity here for social equity applicants to make it happen. You don't have to be a resident. We want you, if you're inclined to come to New York and build a business or apply, think about it. And so it's a pretty exciting time with a lot of investors coming out of the woodwork who never did invest, but they're now awake to cannabis opportunities. So it's a really hot time in the Northeast. It's finally our time and we're ready and raring to play, and it's pretty wild here, in case you didn't know any of that. So, hey, bring your good ideas here. We want that. Sorry, Sam and Krish. We send us some some great people here. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I got a question, in Gene, in New York, the social equity program is set up such that in order to get a license, you I believe you have had to have had a marijuana or drug related felony or offense in your past. Is that correct?
Wasn't that a surprise? So let me explain. That's not pervasive for everyone.
Yeah.
But they just came out with the fact that they would like to serve those who have had a certain type of conviction in New York State that will get a chance at those first social equity licenses. It doesn't mean everybody, because in this definition of social equity players, guess what? Women are included. And so we like that. And certainly people deprived by the war on drugs, not convicted, but let's say live in areas where there's been so much damage and all. Sorry to remind you all, we are the state of the Rockefeller, laws, such draconian, terrible drug laws, stop and frisk back in the day. So it's time that we healed ourselves, made reparation, and part of it is that, Chris, of giving those who have been unfairly persecuted by the war on drugs, giving them first chance at some of those licenses. But it doesn't include the entire social equity pool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And if it's okay, guys, I hate to interrupt the conversation,
Okay,
but
we're having too much fun blathering on here.
I just know we only have 20 minutes left and we have quite a few of the audience questions. So I just
All
want to
right,
try and
go
get
for
through
it.
them. And I apologize for that. But yeah, we have like, I think, there's 10 questions right now. So, I mean, I'm not even sure if we'll be able to get through all these, but we'll do our best. So the first question is, should a social equity applicant have to create a sound business plan? If so, how far out should the business plan go? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What is the suggestion?
You go first.
The answer is yes. You have to have a business plan, and that it doesn't matter if you're a social equity applicant, if you're anyone trying to start any business, you must have a business plan. You must have a plan. Otherwise, how do you know what you're trying to achieve, and how do you know how you're going to get there? And if you don't know that, then how is someone else going to be able to believe in what you're doing and fund you? You absolutely need a plan, and it doesn't have to be completely all fleshed out, but you do need to understand, what could happen if things don't go the way you have planned, and have a plan B or a plan C as well. And then in terms of how long you need to project out, Gene, you've got way too much experience there, so I'm going to let you take that
If
part.
somebody walked in with more than 3 years, listen, investors don't believe the numbers anyway. There's no way I'm believing one number over 3 years. So do not do that, anything more than 3 years, and don't give me some crazy hockey stick. Now, Chris, let me suggest, because Sam's insisting that he's going to try and get through all these questions, why don't you and I give lightning round answers, kind of quick little bullet points.
Quick. That's perfect. Thank you so much. Quick question. What do you mean by hockey stick for anyone that doesn't know what you mean by that?
I looked at a deck yesterday. It said 600,000 first year and 7 million the second year. I don't think any company in the history of the world, shoots up like that. I mean, really, come on, figure it out and get somebody at your side who can help you build a reasonable, pro forma.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So
hockey stick it just looks like that. It just looks like a hockey stick.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you want to be realistic. You want to maybe a little bit more than realistic, but you don't want to have crazy, it's just unrealistic. Yeah.
I'm defining the quick answer scenario I laid out, but also do it bottoms up. Do you know what that means? You figure out how many products you're going to sell and what your focus is and how many dispensaries, let's say. Bottoms up, figuring out what you can sell, not top down. Oh, there's 1,200 dispensaries. I'm going to get 10% of those. Go away. I just had somebody say that to me in their planning. I said, no, we're not doing top down, you know, a percentage of what you can get. Forget it. Bottoms up, brick by brick. This is hard. Get somebody
And,
at your side.
and for retail folk, because I know a lot of the founders on here that are raising, you know, money, they're retail focused. So for retail focused, if you're opening up, like, how would you explain that, like, you know, bottom up analogy or whatever you want to call it, if you're a retail focused business?
Yeah, you know, I think it's a matter of really understanding what are the drivers to the business for any business, but let's say retail specifically. What are the drivers? What kind of traffic are you going to have? What's going on with your product set? What kind of margins can you get in the product? So you come up with a bullet point list of assumptions, and then you build the numbers around that. Again, I will say, this is hard. It's hard to do, but people who are experienced doing it's easy. They can do it with their eyes closed. So find one of those people at your side to help you build those scenarios. It'll
And
make
to
you look
translate
good. Yeah,
to translate that into English, it's all about making assumptions around, okay, how many people are going to walk through your door every single day? How much are they going to buy
yeah,
every single time they come in? Are they going to buy, or are there going to be some that walk in and walk out? And understanding the market is a great way to start to figure out, you know, how your business may be able to perform relative to how others are.
yep,
Definitely.
good.
Thank you. So next question, after forming an LLC sole owner, how and when is the best time to form an S Corp or C Corp?
That's a
Gene.
really good question because we go through this all the time. Because many companies that come through are LLCs. And I've been an institutional investor all my life, and we never invested in an LLC. We had to set up a blocker corp. But actually in our fund, and are you, Chris, sometimes investing in LLCs? Because
Typically not, and if they are an LLC, they are they're doing their taxes as a corporation.
yes, so we want them to flip to a C Corp the moment you think you're going to make $1. That's the tipping point. We just invested in a very famous brand, and he's still an LLC. So we really pressed him. And, you know, he's not profitable yet, so there isn't a tax flow through. But we would rather have a C Corp every time. But if you are an LLC, we'll figure it out. Most institutional investors, though, do not like that or want that. And it's easy to transfer it to a C Corp.
Now, if you're raising your first round and you're pre-revenue, you really haven't, you know, even, you know, been able to really get the business started, you have no cash flow coming in. Do you still think it's wise to, you know, switch to a C Corp right away, you know, before you start pitching investors, or do you think it's better to raise, you know, some initial capital as an LLC, if that makes sense?
What do you think, Chris?
I think if you can raise money as an LLC, that's fine. Typically, you know, early the first round of financing is going to be with friends and family to get the process started, and I think that, you know, if you believe in what you're doing and you know that you're going to eventually get institutional investors to come on board, it's the longer you wait, the more challenging it is to make the transition from LLC to C Corp. So if you can do that, you know, out the gates, then you're doing the smart thing, and I think that investors are going to see that. And if you want to take it a step further, make sure that you're setting your C Corp up as a Delaware corporation. Believe it or not, most companies that are established in the United States are domiciled in the state of Delaware. That's what they do. Investors, it's more of an investor friendly, what's it called, jurisdiction. The laws are, I don't know if I really don't know if California, what the primary differences are, but I will tell you that we typically won't look at it if it's a California C Corp.
You know, let me tell you something, suggest a thought when Chris talked about friends and family. So let me say something controversial. So many people ask me all the time, so I'm sure this is on your mind. How do I get that first seed funding. The best people to go to are people who already know you. You don't have to say who you are, what you did. They already know you. You worked with them. They were your neighbor. Now, here's the controversial thing. Most people don't talk like and say this. I don't believe in going to family. Guess why? You have to look at them at Thanksgiving. But I do believe in going to everybody you know and people who know you and already care about you. Because you don't have to state your credentials. They know you're great. They know you're a go-getter or creative, visionary, who get the job done. So those are the first people. So I sit people down and I make them go through everybody they know. I'm not kidding. Everybody they know. They go, oh yeah, I used to work with this guy. He had a big exit last year. Well, duh. So those are my pearls of wisdom on how to find that first seed investing.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And the next question we had, it was expand on building blocks. And I'm honestly spacing on, which one of you brought that up and when that was brought up. Do either of you remember, or should we ask Carrie, who asked the
I don't know if I said building blocks today, but I always talk about building blocks. I do mention tonight, did mention a couple of times, build brick by brick. So that's part of a building block scenario. So let's say on valuation, it relates there because, oh yeah, read Sam, what Rafi wrote. What's related here to that term is that you want to do one step at a time. You don't want to jump way up to these goofy valuations that make you look and sound really foolish. I'm not kidding, and you won't get our wallet out. So, one step at a time. Valuations, I mean, pro forma financials, one step at a time, a building block approach to building the business up, not some simple low number, reasonable number, year one, and some astronomical top line in year two. It just knocks you out of the box for credibility.
Gene, what do you think a piece of paper in Los Angeles is worth for a dispensary license?
Oh, wow. You would have to say LA.
In New York is a completely different story.
Yeah, it is.
Because
is it built out, a license that's built out, or they just were awarded one?
Well, right. And so our friends here that are on the phone have licenses that have not been built out yet.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I had actually forgotten that is the one of the situations. Well, let me tell you, to me, you have the golden ticket. Now go, turn it into real gold, See, that's what just happened in New York today with these 50 hemp growers. They have the golden ticket. They're not all going to make it. I've talked to many of them. Some are complete stupid idiots. I'm not kidding you. But so if you can articulate the things that we're talking about tonight, what you need to do, your capital needs, who you're going to hire, do they have their location necessarily? I like Bobby's comment. Do you understand what your product set is? Do you know who your wholesalers are? Those are the people who get funded, who can tell the story. And then even if you do get funded, but you can't tell your story, you're going to lose. So you got to figure out what to do and how to do it. Now, here's the luck that you all have. You're surrounded by experience. You guys have been at it for years and years. We haven't. We're like stupid idiots here because we haven't, we don't have an adult use market. We have 10 licenses in the entire state. And that's how I got my start. I was lucky enough to be part of one of those. Each license gets to grow, extract, and have 4 dispensaries. There are only 4. Can you imagine that? 4 times 10, 40. Imagine 40 CVSs in an entire state of 20 million people, okay? That's why we're like coming out of the dark ages to finally. So same with you. You have the golden ticket. Now tell the story on location, on your target market, how you're going to go after them. We invested in a fabulous woman in Massachusetts. She has one heck of a marketing team. And so she's pulling in customers like crazy. pulling in that target. She's female focused, so she's going after female with female products. So what's your target? Do you know how to go after them with a great marketing campaign? Do you know how to find the right products? Maybe do some branded products. That could be cool. So that license to me can be very valuable if you can tell that story.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yes, there's a lot of resources here, meaning that, you know, we've got so many dispensaries and businesses all over the city. Go walk in, you know, a handful
Yeah.
of different dispensaries in different parts of town and see what folks are doing. Try to talk to the owner if you can, or talk to the manager and see if you can understand their business better. Perhaps, you know, partner up with one to build out your storefront. You know, I think those kinds of things are going to set you up for success.
I like that advice. I think that's critical advice. And, you know, what's the culture you want to create? Let me press on that for a quick second. Being a woman consumer, I don't want to walk into some heavy bro culture where I'm shoveled up to a window and talking to the bud tender and picking something out on a screen. And a lot of newbies don't want that. So if you want to have a dispensary that has a conversation, that has you know, real care and attention around efficacy with the people who come in, then do that. Create a culture of what you think would work to draw the best opportunity. Those are the dispensaries that win. And hey, you can create a bro culture. Maybe that's your focus. Have fun, you know, with the right kind of merch and everything else. But if that's not for you, figure out what that culture is, because there's so many new players, new people in the business, especially women, both Gen Z, new type women, and the boomers. Because remember, we were smoking a long time before you guys even were born. So there. And so we're, you know, back at it, looking for great products, maybe low dose products, maybe some of the great drinks that Chris was smart enough to invest in drinks like that. Get a hold of great products and talk to those wholesalers and have a plan for what your product set is.
Definitely. Thank you both so much. Yeah, great insight. The next question, Andrea or Andrea, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, said, I need investors. How can I contact the speakers? Gene, you left your contact info in the chat. Chris, if you're willing to leave your contact info in the chat, great. I know you invest more in later stage companies, so I'm not sure. I know you're probably not investing into first round. But one thing I just wanted to kind of like piggyback off that question is, like if I don't have friends and family that have like the capital I need, and I need to find outside investors, where do I find them?
You have to network, and you know this, but I'll just say it. Guys are born knowing how to network. They're pitching coins into baseball hats from the time they're a kid. They're playing basketball. They're talking to their buddies. And it's a lot easier for guys who just kind of grow up this way. They're going to build a business. They call up their buddies and say, hey, I'm building this, will you invest? And the buddy says yes. Women just aren't predisposed to do that, but we have to learn to network. So there are many women's groups now who care about each other. So if you are one of those women license holders, then find your way into some great women's group. We have one at ArcView. It's called the Women Inclusion Network. We want to know you. And there's over 150 of those women who get together. Now, here's my other pitch. So we are very involved with Pitch Force, which happens once a month. And it's a really great way to meet investors. And I'm looking for just a couple more companies to pitch. It's on a funky day. It is on 4/20, but Pacific time, it's in the afternoon, so it shouldn't ruin your day. If you have a company you're ready to pitch, I need a couple more companies. Send me an email, send me either your exec summary or paragraph, because I can give you a forum to meet about 6 investors, and I'm one of the judges. So come on in. And hey, I'll answer anybody by email. It's hard to talk to everybody, but I'll answer any email. So if you write to me, I'll answer you.
I just put my email on the chat as well, so please feel
Cool.
free to reach out. Happy to help you think through things. At this time, we're not investing in primarily early stage businesses at all. We're really focused on later stage. That's just kind of our focus and mandate right now. But we've all been there and can certainly do what we can to help you individually.
That's awesome. And one thing I will say is, I've met both of these, both of the speakers in the past. I've communicated with them in the past, met them in person. And even for me, sometimes it's hard to get a hold of them just because they're extremely busy, and I never take it personally. So I just want to, make sure everyone knows that, like, don't take anything personally, especially when you're reaching out to investors. Like Chris has said a few times, it's really just sales. And like in sales, like, I've sold to dispensaries before, and sometimes the dispensary, they don't answer you. They don't want to see you. They don't want a meeting. The security guard tells you, "Oh, no, I see your bag. We're not taking meetings. Gotta go." And if I just gave up that one time, like, sure, it might be a little bit easier, but going back and trying again, following up, like, the fortune is in the follow-up is something I learned from one of my mentors early on. And pitching investors really is sales. They, like, sometimes they're not responding on purpose to kind of test you. With Gene and Krish, I don't think that'll be the case. I think they're just extremely busy, and I think when you're asking for some advice, they'll be willing to help. And that's another thing I'll also say that really helped me. I had a terrible business. I had a terrible business plan. I did not know what I was doing. I was just a young kid that was super excited. And the one thing that really helped me just get in touch with a lot of investors, which for some people, that's the hardest part. You might have something really good. You might have your pitch down, but you might not be able to get in front of people. And something that really helped me was, like, just kind of like going around to all the different events, that the investors are speaking at. A lot of them I would sneak into, which you can just do some Google searches. Now events are coming back on. There's webinars and stuff, but just finding out who the investors are, and reaching out to them and asking for advice. I don't know, Gene and Chris, what you think of that, but it worked extremely well for me. I thought I knew what I was doing, and I thought I knew everything, so I didn't really want the advice. I was just told by one of my mentors, that's the best way to kind of get in touch, and it honestly worked. And then I realized, shoot, I actually need this advice. I don't know what I'm doing, and I thought I did, but yeah, I don't know if you guys
Well,
have anything.
I actually said this pearl of wisdom earlier, but it does work. Let's say you don't get the wallet out of the pocket the first meeting. And by the way, your whole goal in the first meeting is just to get the second meeting. Let's say you get the second meeting, you don't, you didn't make the sale. What investors like are short updates. Hey, I did win, the new head as our new chief revenue officer. She came from, Salesforce, or we just won a major customer, or we just finished our MVP. So it's important to do little snippets, not long, huge, emails and decks, but little snippets. And that really can keep the things going.
Yes, and even if you don't hear back, feel free to stay persistent with those that you do communicate with, that do connect with you, because chances are they're not doing because they don't want to talk to you. They probably just completely missed it, and they've got 1,000 emails that came in after you, and it's hard to get to that one.
Yeah, I mean, once you guys
Stay
raise
persistent.
money, once
Stay
you guys
hungry.
raise money, if you ask one of your investors to see their email, because I did that with one of the investors I got close to, and it's literally just like every minute, different companies sending them a pitch deck. And so it's just, yeah, like thank you guys for that. Next
Well, you know
question.
what, Sam, one more thing though. There's lots and more now that real-time in live events are happening of pitch contests. That's why we're involved with that pitch force. There's several coming up. ArcView's finally going to restart its IRL, in real life events. And going to these events and gatherings, that's a great way to meet people. So I'd search for those and have a chance to pitch wherever you can.
Definitely. Now we are over our time limit. I'm sure the audience, is, would love to stay on and, listen, but I want to be respectful of both your time. If either of you have to hop off, let me know. We do have a few more questions though, if either of you can stay on.
We'll do a
But
couple more questions.
I got
I
a
won't
little few
mention
more
that
minutes.
it's 10 o'clock in New York City, but we
Yeah,
never
I know.
sleep here. We never sleep here anyway, so what the heck?
Gene stays out till 4 a.m.
Yeah,
because
I
bars
stay
stay
out.
open.
Yeah, I'll go to the clubs till 4 a.m.
That's awesome. Okay, the next question is how can owners with 50% equity attract investors when they can only offer 49% or less? Yeah,
Yeah, we're living through that right now because those hemp growers I told you about, they have to have 51%.
oh, so it's the
But
same. Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
Great.
on
So
this
you're
new
familiar,
fleet,
yeah.
not for the new stuff coming up, the new licenses, but the current hemp and processors have to have 51%. But guess what? It is happening. Because again, I see what you have, our wonderful audience tonight, and what they have as the golden ticket. Treat it that way, view it that way. Now go tell a story that can get our wallet out.
Definitely. Chris, do you have anything to add to that, or?
So the question specifically is if you're right at 51%.
They have to have a majority ownership. So the question is, how do I, make that happen?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the program in LA and I guess New York as well was built that way so that
Yeah.
predatory investors don't come in and kind of like
Yeah,
overrun the founder that was awarded the license because they're the one that deserved it type of
yeah.
thing.
We have a 2-year moratorium on that for the hemp people now, and it's a 3-year for those future licenses yet to be put out there.
Look, I think there's different ways you can do it, and it's you need to think through how do you structure it, and and be smart about how you structuring it out your cap table. Perhaps one way you could get around it is by issuing a convertible note. So you're not issuing equity right now. I don't know what the rules are around specifically convertible notes. Now these are basically it's debt that at some point in a later date it converts into equity, and so a lot of transactions have been structured this way. For example, Canadian cannabis operators that are publicly traded on U.S. exchanges that are looking to make investments in the U.S. they've done through convertible notes. It's not an equity ownership yet, but it could be at some point in the future.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, Chris. Here's what's going on right now with these hemp people. The active term sheets are coming in. They're putting it forward for that 49%, putting forward the capital needs. It may not be enough, so they're gonna do the future in some debt as they need to build out OpEx, operating expense, and CapEx, capital expense for equipment. But then I'm seeing term sheets that have it's really a price for a future buyout. So at this date, I am going to pay you, X amount of dollars to buy it out completely after the moratorium's over. So there's a little trick right there that maybe you can negotiate for. Or if you don't want that, maybe it's you as the owner or have a right of first refusal to buy it back yourself, buy back their investment. So get a good lawyer. That's another trick we didn't even talk about. If a person says to me, I say to them, who's your lawyer? They say, oh, my husband's brother's a real estate lawyer. Bad move. Find a real securities lawyer who knows what the heck they're doing. And then they can help guide you. And there's plenty of those great lawyers up and down California who care about social equity people, will not rip you off and give you good advice. Find them. If you can't, ask me. I'll help you find them.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you so
another
much.
thing that you may want to consider is doing an employee stock option plan whereby it's not only for you as the owner to receive equity in the company for performance, but also as you build out your team that's the mechanism that you reward employees for but with that equity to get additional equity. I don't know how much money you're raising if you're already at 51%, but it really kind of depends on how much you're raising, and what percentage of the company you're effectively going to be selling in that financing round. So perhaps one way to do it would be also to you kind of have to mess around with the valuation of the business, but you don't want to get into that. You want to be able to allow yourself enough cushion, from the beginning. Don't handicap yourself coming out the gate.
Agree.
Definitely. Thank you both for that. And then I think we have 3 more questions. The first of those 3 is how do you know when your company is ready for financing? And where should you pitch your business? We
Yeah.
kind of answered a little bit about the second part of that question, but how do you know when you're ready?
Yeah, I really do believe on second part of the question to go to people who already care about you and know you first. And just sit down and make a huge list looking at your contacts. It's more people than you might think could be interested. And send them just a short forward ready email that says, hey, Joe, I'm building a great business. Might you have 30 minutes for me to come and tell you about it? Don't send them the deck. Send them a short paragraph or bullet points of what you're building. Use the deck for the meeting. And this can either be in person, which is more effective, or Zoom, but do that. Now, are you ready? Here's, in my view, you're ready. Now, should we think about just a retail license, Sam? I'll speak to both because I know many do have this. Okay. So let's say you do have the golden ticket. Well, guess what? You better get yourself ready. And I saw some people laughingly in the chat say, hey, I got to get ready. Well, good, do that. Follow our thinking. Get people at your side to help you. Form your own personal board of advisors. Bring them in for pizza and beer and figure out what you should say in your deck and what your culture is going to be and who you want on your team, and put that story down and go tell that story. Guess what? Now you're ready. And certainly do a short little pro forma of what you can pull off. And you're going to be able to do that because you're going to pull your buddy in who knows how to do that. Now you're ready. You can be ready if you haven't done any of those things in the next 10 days. And then you can start calling on people that you know and go pitch them. That's how to make it happen.
Definitely.
I will say that if you're asking the question, how do you know if you're ready? You're probably not ready. And the reason why I say that is because I think it comes back to creating that business plan and understanding what is required to achieve that business plan. Some of that is going to take time and energy, sweat equity as we call it. Some of that is going to take real money to be able to get done. Do you have that money? And if the answer is no, then clearly it's time to go raise some money to get that done.
Definitely. Thank you both for that. The second to last question is, and this is a question I definitely had as a first-time fundraiser, in cannabis. Am I understanding this correctly? Building a cannabis business takes the same strategies in building a nonprofit org. For example, business model, pitch, partnerships, fundraising, etc., and repeat again and again.
What's the question, Sam?
So am I understanding this correctly? Building a cannabis business takes the same strategies in building a nonprofit, or
yeah, it's a strategy, it's a team, it's a focus, it's how you're going to execute. It's not just what you're building, it's how you're going to make that product or service or your retail shop cross the finish line, grow, have top line revenue, have bottom line profitability. Do you understand the drivers to the business? That's the same for all businesses, including not-for-profits, how you're going to build it and make it tick and hum. And so those disciplines are very leverageable into this cannabis world. Unfortunately, there's all these crazy regulations and this 50-state fiefdom, and we're too dumb as a country to have these 280E regulations and, you know, the stigma on the plant. So you've got all those layers of, you know, of just brick walls. But everything else around strategy and execution's the same.
And one thing I want to say that I think if you guys don't already know this, you might want to consider putting this into your like financial models and your planning, or you know, whatever you want to call it. But you know, I'm sure you all know, like, you know, some dispensaries charge for shelf space where they will charge a brand to, you know, be on the shelf, to have a little display. You know, if it's a reasonable cost, it works for some dispensaries, but a lot of the dispensaries that do that overcharge, and then they really don't carry the right brands. And then, you know, it's just brands that are desperate for shelf space and don't really sell, don't attract customers. Obviously, I think something that's important is you want partnerships with the right brands. You want the brands that are going to bring in customers. You want the brands that, you know, essentially like, you know, you're going to like use their audience to drive traffic into their store. And I'm sure you guys know, you can just look at Weed Maps and look at different dispensaries in the area, see the brands that are on all of the shelves in the area, and you can pretty much guess that those are the ones that, you know, you're definitely going to want to have on your shelf. And one thing I'd suggest that I've seen work really well for dispensaries is they don't charge a shelf space in cash. They get that in product. And brands are much more willing. Like, I work for a distribution company. I manage you know, probably like 15, 16 different brands. And you know, they're always interested in shelf space if it's them like paying with product. They're never interested, and I always tell them you shouldn't be interested in anyone that's charging more than $250 or $500 max a month in cash, because otherwise it's like you're just paying their rent, and they're, you know, it's like your product's probably not going to sell. They're not going to be ordering a lot. And so that's just a piece of advice I have for you guys. You know, whatever you do, definitely figure out a model where you can have partnerships, you know, and they're kind of helping you with your expenses for the shelf space. But
Yeah,
if you can
yeah,
get some product up front for free that you can sell, it's like, you know, I don't know, back in the day, you know, getting fronted your first, you know, your first little sack, and you know, that's kind of how you get started, except you don't actually have to pay them back. You know, it's like so that, I mean, that's just like a way. And then they come in and they actually will build out your store. They'll make it look cool. You know, they'll
yeah.
like do their little designs and their little shelf, and store or brands kind of you know, they go over the top. You know, they want their brand to look good, and in turn it makes your store look good. So that's just you know, my quick tip on that.
Good.
And either of you have anything to add to that before we move to the last question?
Well, I'm very used to that in Massachusetts. That's been open now a few years. It's really vibrant there. And so just like you said, those retailers had to go work with the wholesalers, get great product and get terms. That's what you're talking about, Sam. Getting good terms so they don't have to pay upon receipt of product, you know? So that can help them get through those early rough first months
and
and years.
and yes, and one thing I want to add to that, because I literally went to a dispensary you know, last week. They wanted to order some of our products, and I said, hey, you're 10 minutes away from my house, I'm going to stop by, just see what's up. You know, they're still doing construction. They're not even, I mean, close to being done yet. I guess they got their license already. You know, they had like another shop, and you know, I don't know how it all worked, but you know, like they had their license already, and they were already kind of you know, like starting to intake product before the dispensary was even ready to build.
Yeah,
I don't know how that's possible, but I guess they did it. I told them, look, I'm glad you want to order from us, but I'm not going to sell you anything until you're ready, because I've
sure.
seen it happen time and time again where people are about to open in 2 weeks, so they need the product, and then they get delayed, and then essentially the product that they're sitting on is just old. It's degraded. It's like, you know, not anything good. And then the customers that come into your dispensary for the first time, their first experience buying product from you is, oh, it's old product.
Yeah, see,
And it's
that's where operational excellence on your team makes a difference. So the smartest retailers that I know brought in people who could manage inventory, who could buy properly and buy right. Timings, everything, and then create those good terms. And
But by the
so,
way, that means also using data and
yeah,
understanding how to use that data to manage your business. The data is not perfect. The data is not great, but you know, goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you're opening a retail store, a dispensary, and you don't have any retail experience in the past, bring someone in who does.
Yeah, that's great advice. I was trying to start a business that in a field I'd never done before, and that was one of the biggest pieces of feedback investors gave me is, look, it's a great idea, but dude, how are you going to do it? So yeah, great advice.
It's one thing if you're building a business and it's the first time you've done it and you're the only one that's doing it. This is an industry, particularly in California, particularly in LA, that it's highly competitive, very competitive. And you have companies that now have a lot of capital resources behind it that are competing against you. And so you've got to find your specific niche, your specific place that you can attract customers in spite of the competition or against that competition rather. And in order to be competitive, you've got to be smart. And I think in order to be smart, you've got to have a lot of people with a lot of with different skills that they bring to the table, and all of you cover each other's blind spots because you're going to have.
Definitely. Thank you. And then the last question, what is the upside downside of having one investor versus having multiple investors?
Oh, boy. If you pick the wrong investor, your life will be miserable. And if you happen to have a syndicate, meaning more than one, maybe 4 or 5, then those other 4 or 5 can, help you manage the one unruly investor. And then I've been through this a lot, even recently on a Corinne investment. And this savvy CEO, she just found a way to buy out the bad dude. And so those kinds of things have to happen. So you should do your homework on these people who might be awful. You got to talk to their other investments and CEOs and say, what kind of investor is this person?
Assuming that they are a good investor, however, let's say you've raised money from 3 solid investors, and now it's you're a year and a half down the road, and you need to raise more money, or 6 months down the road, however long it takes. If those investors are tapped out for whatever reason, the timing doesn't work for them, then you're going to have to go find new investors to help fund your business going forward. And I think that having having multiple investors, diversified your cap table with a number of investors, allows you to have more support for those subsequent rounds when you're going to need it. So that's one. I think the flip side of it is if you have too many investors on the cap table, it does become an administrative burden, and it oftentimes, if you have to get their consent to do anything on a subsequent raise, there's a lot of herding cats. So you have to manage your investors just like you have to manage your team. So I think there's a balance that you got to strike, and know your investors really well, and take on investors as much as possible that can also serve as partners. I talked about bringing on someone that has strong retail experience. If your investor has good retail experience, they can probably provide a lot of the resources that you need early on to get your business going.
Definitely. Thank you both for that. And I'll just add that what I was told early on that I think you'll both agree with is that, like, when you bring on an investor, it's like getting married. You're kind of together forever. And divorces are really messy in business, as Gene kind of alluded to. And I think one thing that I didn't do when I was fundraising, but I kind of learned, and I've learned from other people. I mean, Christian, Gene, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think just as much as the investors are interviewing you guys, you want to be interviewing the investors. Ego aside, you don't want to come into it like egotistically or like a D-bag or anything like that, but just asking questions. Asking them like, hey, what other businesses have you invested into? And just asking questions, and making them qualifying them essentially, and just spending time with them, taking them out to dinner, making sure that you actually like this person, because they're more likely than not, especially early investors, they're going to be calling you every week asking for updates. They're going to be calling you like, hey, when's this happening? Hey, I thought this was going to happen. And it's like you're literally married to them. You're going to talk to them a lot. So you want to make sure it's someone you like, I think, is just something that I learned. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that, but I mean,
I
that's
will say with
something.
that, the flaw with that analogy is it's not forever. An investor is not investing forever. An investor is investing for an exit at some point. They want to be able to monetize that investment, um, and
Totally.
that it could seem like forever, but typically they're going to have a specific investment hold period that they have in their mind or mandated if they're a fund, if they're investing out of a fund. So I think it's important to understand if you're making an investment, how long, how long do you anticipate holding the investment? How, when do you need to get liquidity for your investment? Because if there's a mismatch there, then, chances are at some point down the road, you're going to see pressure for you to do things that may be unnatural or not in the flow of where you're at in your business cycle.
Thank you for that. Well, that wraps up our questions. I know we went way over, so I really appreciate both your time. I mean, I know that we were over, but if either of you guys have any last minute thoughts, Gene, I know it's much later for you, so if you have any last minute thoughts, please go ahead. If you need to
Oh,
get
I'm
to,
ready to go clubbing, so, that's.
definitely. Well, thank you so much for staying on. We appreciate you, Chris. Do you have any
No.
last thoughts before we hop off?
When you're talking to investors, I think you want to make sure that they understand your thought process, that that they feel confident that you've thought everything through. They see your hunger and understand that you're a resourceful person. If there's an issue, if there's a problem, you're going to figure out a way to get it figured out and get it done. And I think that the investor and investee relationship, one of the critical elements that's important is understanding that is your CEO, is your entrepreneur coachable. So
Yeah.
we as investors have seen all kinds of different scenarios, and we want to help the entrepreneurs that we back, and we want them to take our advice seriously. So knowing that they're coachable and not hard-headed is really important when you're looking at an investment, and is going to be important for you to raise money.
Those are great points, and I like to share this. Usually when I speak, I share my favorite proverb, which is if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So pull those people by your side to help you in these critical next steps. As said, you've got the golden ticket. Now go just make it happen and reach for that help, and you will make it happen.
Definitely. Thank you both so much for hopping on. We really appreciate it. And, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. And, we look forward to connecting again soon. For everyone else, thank you for attending the spring webinar series, Cannabis Investor Q&A. Don't forget to register for the DCR's new series of virtual programming in March here. The link should be, in the chat box. And if it's not already there, it should be popping up any second. The events take place every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. on Zoom. Before you leave, please fill out a brief survey to share your experience tonight. And that link should be in the chat box as well. And yeah, thank you for attending. We look forward to seeing you all again, and have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.